Oliver. Thank you so much for joining me. Oliver, do you want to just introduce yourself while I find the right questions?
Sure. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oliver Feakins. I'm from a company called TrackFive. We own a series of niche job boards for platforms in various verticals, and we operate out of the US.
Fabulous. Okay, so for you, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges in owning a job board, and how does knowing what that challenge is help make you successful?
Yeah, I think there's a... Which one? Can I pick more than one? There's a ton of challenges with running job boards in the industry. I think all of us in this room attest to that. It's also why we get out of bed in the morning, right? We like a tough challenge. I think some of the most recent ones, a challenge and an opportunity would be just the shifting, degree of technology that we're encompassing, whether it be, AI, for example, a challenge and an opportunity. Changes in general from, we'll call it like the ad market, the marketing segment, right? That's always changing. Also, data and the data requirements are changing, I think is a big challenge that we overcome. I'll give you a quick example. Like everyone else, we're going down the AI path and have. What we learned really quickly is that AI, to really do AI, requires a lot of data. And what we found out is that our job board, right, our platform, essentially our legacy platform, wasn't really built to be able to handle that amount of data, right? So we had to rethink our entire architecture of how we build a platform. Instead of being a website with a database or a database-driven website, to more of a microservice platform so that we can keep all this data, use it. So we're tracking, everything. We're tracking when users come on, what jobs they look at, what jobs they don't, who they apply to, when they come back. And now we're on the second leg of that journey, which we talked about in one of the sessions, of bringing that data loop back from the applicant tracking system. So that's kind of next on our radar, right? So we know what the user is doing from here to there. Once they go out, it's kind of this nebulous, like, were they called? Did they get hired? Did they come back? Were they not satisfied, right? So now we are going through the painstaking process of bringing all that data back, washing it back in, and applying that to not just behavioral aspects of the user, but also marketing. Like what, take it to the smallest grain, right? What ad copy on Facebook worked well for this type of individual? Can we apply that data in real time to the more macro level marketing changes? So yeah, we've had to become really good at data, and we're primarily, similar to Mohammed, product driven, marketing driven. So now we have to learn how to be data driven.
I think you started to touch this a little bit about the objective of improving the outcome further down the line. So job boards maybe traditionally were about passing applicants to hiring managers, but we're looking at how to improve that outcome for applied placement. How are you doing that? And how can other people?
Yeah, I mean, it helps that we're in niches. So in our niches, there happens to be niche ATSs. So there's less and more of a general ATS and more like niche-related ATSs. So there are less of them. But it's even beyond like the data feedback loop that we're trying to bring back into the platforms. In going through this process, we found something else, which is the attribution reporting of these applicant tracking systems is not as accurate as it should be. This is really interesting because we live in a society where there's so many different marketing channels and so many different places that users can consume job data. Even think of the programmatic world, right? Or even just search and social. These job candidates don't just go to one place. They go to several different places. They may apply to the same job from several different places or multiple. And as we're going through this data project, we're finding out that 30 to 40% of the hires from our candidates that came from us were being misattributed to other vendors because within a week they applied to Trumpler, Source, and Indeed, right? So now the conversation becomes with clients, what gets credit for that, right? Do we, when you're looking at our ROAS or you're looking at our ROI, was it us that it was included or was it Indeed? It's that old adage, was it the billboard, was it the radio station, was it the newspaper? So, not only are we working to kind of move down the funnel to be able to help re-engagement and candidate engagement and to actually help the hiring process, we have to start at the very tippy top, which is, are we looking at the same data? can we agree on what a success KPI is? And that's like step one, and we immediately fell into that. We're like, oh no, we can't even agree on how we're both succeeding. So had to change first.
When you say we can't agree, you mean the hiring manager and yourselves, and I guess the ATS in that. I mean, they can be tracking in different ways, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even just the ATS and the marketplace, like or the job board, right? It's the numerous amounts of elements that make up today's modern HR tech stack, right? So think of all the engagement tools. There's all these data analytics tools that step in between candidate entrance and hireability that impact the data stream. So there's a vendor in our space called Staffing Engine, and essentially Staffing Engine works for staffing companies, and it goes into the ATS environment and it provides, snapshots of these are how many candidates that were never contacted, these ones came from here. It's basically an enhanced HR tech analytics platform. We ran into an issue with a client where they were engaging a platform like this, and it had a bug, and it freaked out, and it essentially, changed all the attributions for this client. And the client had no idea, the vendor had no idea, we had no idea. So it wasn't until we pressure tested this data and actually got in and washed it through our platform as the single source of truth that we're able to say, hey, you're not counting us for 50% of your placements. That makes a big deal when you're having a conversation with a hiring manager about how you're doing. So.
We've talked a bit about SEO today and some marketing. And I know you had some thoughts about marketing or SEO tips for yourself and growing job boards in 2025.
Yeah, that's kind of my background. I started in an SEO firm for the first 15 years of my life, or career, I should say, not life. Started really young. So here's what I know about job boards and SEO, right? So initial problem for job boards is they are incredibly large as from an architecture and page standpoint. It's very difficult for spiders, specifically Google, to be able to index and crawl the architecture of today's job sites. Even with XML feeds and everything else like that, it is just incredibly challenging and deep from a hierarchical level for spiders to crawl. So what this looks like is that you have hundreds of thousands of pages on your job site that are only a fraction, maybe 20% are being indexed. So if you only get 20% of your content indexed by Google, you're only ranking for 20% of your content. So there are some things you can do to kind of help that out. But it's interesting, and I'm sure all of you have Search Console, check it out. Go to Search Console, look at your indexability, and I promise you it'll be 50% of what you have on your site, which is a problem. You can't rank for what you don't index. The second part of this, and some of it's just all speed and other things, mobile reliability, things like that. But I would say the other thing that we're looking at as well from a search perspective is we're noticing obviously the trend of people using ChatGPT and AI products for job searching. So this is, and even within Google, right, like Gemini and the zero-click search results. So we've been really leaning into kind of future-proofing our search strategies for how we can get our jobs to show up on, for example, ChatGPT, and also just the kind of what we're seeing as far as the impact from zero-click search results in the results from search engine optimization and paid search. So it's really keeping us on our toes.
Thank you for that. Mohammed spoke about he uses two different pricing models. So for you, I'm interested in what your pricing model is. And then my second part of the question is around any secondary revenue streams beyond job postings that you've explored. I guess that Mohammed has as well.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of Mohammed because he has a newer job board, right? So he's growing his job board, he's building clients. He can kind of do this the right way. We have a legacy product. We've been in business for 17 years, and we have hundreds upon hundreds of clients that it's really difficult for us to, for example, change the pricing model at this point because they have a decade's worth of experience with it. So it's like getting everybody on a plane to Hawaii and saying we're going to Chicago. It's not. You got to get everybody on board, right? So right now we have a subscription-based model. It's an inclusive model. And includes things like, obviously, your job postings, database access, and some other bits and pieces in there that help with engagement, matchability, things like that. What we've done to increase that, we've obviously just regular rate increases, but that only goes so far. So what we needed to do is provide value. How can our clients give us more money? And there's two things that the clients will pay for. obviously the first one is common sense, more volume, right? Give us more. The other is semblance of exclusivity. So think of, I'm sure most of you guys, and ladies and gentlemen in this room, there's some element of cross-merchandising when someone applies for a job, that there should be, right? You applied for this job, here's 3 other jobs that you might be interested in, right? So you're taking that candidate and allowing them to choose options. So with our ability to upsell that exclusivity, we're limiting, if someone's applied to this job, we will slow down the ability for them to be cross-merchandised to in a way that gives them more options. The other option would be, for example, we have a communal database. So one of our products is, I'm sure a lot of you have this, where hiring organizations can go into a database, download resumes, things like that. We would hide them from the database for an extended period of time. So we found that clients are really interested in paying more for that. And then we also charge that exclusivity on a cost per application basis instead of a flat rate. And then moving forward, what we're really, really trying to get to now, which requires all the data stuff we talked about earlier, is that pay-per placement model, pay-per hire model. So we've been really, really feverishly going through this exercise to get that data back so we can figure out what that price point should be. And then more importantly, as a company, how can we inflect that price point? We need to provide that profit margin within that cost of customer acquisition and that per hire placement cost. So what levers can we pull to be able to produce profit for us, to be able to help engagement and help that hire happen? So that's what we're moving to.
I'm really interested in the more exclusivity model, and I don't know whether anybody else does that, because I think about it from a candidate perspective, is that not a concern that is not the best candidate experience?
Yeah, so it depends, right? So you can flip it and say, if someone's applied to somebody, they had the option to apply for everybody else, so they chose a specific person. We're opening up that conversation, generally speaking, for our entire platform to give them other options. And it's not that we don't show them any options, we just show them less and delay it. As the other option, right, we had this conversation in the first segment, or second segment today, where we're all double-sided marketplaces. We all have clients and we all have users that we have to satisfy. And, if you think about it, it's like you have to serve both. But really, real talk, you kind of have to concentrate on not one, or how do I say this? Like, you have to make sure they're both represented, but at the end of the day, the clients are paying our bills, right? So at the end of the day, if we have tons of users and nobody to pay for them, we go out of business. So we need to make sure there's a very, very valid, rich experience for both. But yeah, so we need to giving the clients less competition and helping them place more, while also reducing some of the noise for the candidate. I would say noise, but it's a little bit nicer than that. We're recommending, qualified jobs for them, but it's really a win for both. And it just so happens that the clients will pay more for it. So there you go. We all win.
I think that's an interesting conversation. But 2 minutes left. In 2 minutes, can you give me your take on the future of job boards versus platforms or marketplaces?
Yeah. So it's like, there's so many terms now, right? It's like, where does one end and the other begin? And I think a marketplace different from a job board is where instead of showing jobs and having a candidate apply for those jobs, a marketplace is the reverse. You're taking a candidate and suggesting them and re-engaging them and nurturing them through different jobs that make the most sense they're matching. And I think that's where the market's going to go. I think the market's going to move in from a directory or list of jobs to more of a curated AI-driven matched process and a re-engaged process. I also think the future of job boards is moving down the funnel. So instead of at the acquisition stage of the funnel, moving down to the placeability, helping these hiring organizations do more with less and helping them get to a hire faster. That's where I think as an industry we're going to value that.
Thank you very much. And I'm so sorry, we're out of time, but I'm bringing Louise on stage. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.